Welcome to 2 hours of crazy malicious compliance. Play this in the background as you go about your day or evening and have sweet karma and justice be your companion. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Diva Chef told me just stand there and be quiet. Okay. By Artful Dodger 1431. Here's some background. Let me take you into my past. Again, I'm in the kitchen of a large culinary company and catering company. You get these more often than most. A diva in the kitchen. Could be a cook, a chef, or someone with a lot of attitude. Let me introduce you to Chef Smokey, and the reason will be explained in a moment. At the time, he was a line cook with some attitude issues. He had just joined on with us and he acted like he was going to be the next top chef in this company. He came over to our main line, looked things over, and then he came to the prep zone. Now, the difference in the prep zone and the main line is the type of burners. On the main line, we have gas ranges, 6 in fact, and in the prep zone, we have almost all L-shaped counters with induction burners set up. On unusually swamped nights, the prep zone will handle appetizers for the main line. So here comes Chef Smokey about to take the lead on appetizers. Myself and one other person are working hard, but apparently not smart enough. So Chef Smokey grabs multiple pans and puts them on the induction burners. He revs them up super high and adds his olive oil. Now, there are 2 glitches in this scenario. Issue 1. Induction burners, these older ones, use specific pans and they have a special setup to work, so they can be a little temperamental when they do work, and if you use the wrong pan, either the pan won't work or they act up. Issue 2 is that olive oil smokes faster than normal canola or vegetable oil or the mixed oil that we have on site. The recipe calls for olive oil. We don't pump our induction burners to super high, especially when you're using pans not made for it, because, well, the pans work, but they can run super hot. They can overload the induction burner, or they might not just work at all. He sprays oil into all 5 pans that he has on super high. He gives us a super conceited look. I say, you might not wanna. Chef Smokey says, zip it. You seriously might not just be quiet and watch. With all due respect, you... And I reach to lower the settings on the induction and he nearly spanks my hand. Just stand there and be quiet. The malicious compliance. Okay, learn the hard way, I think. Chef Smokey starts his first pan, dropping his appetizer to cook. It comes out great, but as he reaches for his second pan, the oil has already instant burned. Pan 3, 4, 5 are also burned oil. They're smoking. So, being a resilient, smart, and problem-solving human he is, he wipes the pans and sprays oil in them. Oil instant burns. Okay, so he tries a new tactic. Chef Smokey drops oil and then he drops the appetizer material at the same moment. Nice try. His appetizer instant burns because his oil was already burned quick. He goes through this cycle about 3 times of burning product pretty fast. He is getting raging PO'd. So I try to stop him, but he's got to try one last time. He burns it again. He lays his oil in his pans again and I lean in and say, hey, Smokey the Bear, your oil's burning again. The aftermath. Chef Smokey backs off. Then it's each man to a pan, heat turned to a moderate level. While Chef Smokey starts the re-prep of the lost product he's burned through, let me note that he burned through most of the day's product, so he was going to spend the day re-prepping. He spent a good day silent. The guys in the kitchen used my nickname and I gave him, and some called him Smokey the Bear, some called him Chef Smokey, and it stuck until he quit. Customer asked me to count out a bag of live crickets in front of her, loses out on bonus crickets. Posted by Albino Raven 666. I, 32-year-old female, work part-time at a pet store to supplement my income as my salary of my full-time teacher doesn't always pay the bills. Plus, I have a few pets and 20% off of in-store purchases is rather helpful. Anyway, one of the things that we supply are live and frozen feeder animals for things like reptiles, certain aquatic creatures, and invertebrates. These include things like mice and rats, Dubai roaches, bloodworms, mealworms, waxworms, superworms, and crickets. The mice and the rats are either frozen or live, but either way they're easy to count and box up for the customer. Dubai roaches, mealworms, waxworms, and superworms are pre-packaged and price marked, but the crickets are not. Crickets are kept in these large containers with mesh top egg cartons for the crickets to climb and hide in, cricket food, and hydration. This means that when the customers ask for crickets, which we usually sell by the dozen, we have to count and retrieve them manually while putting them in a plastic bag that we then fill with air and then tie off to go to the customer. Our method for transferring the crickets is to lightly tap the egg cartons over a funnel-like object that doesn't have a hole at the bottom. We tap the crickets in, wrap the plastic bag around the mouth of the funnel, then tip it and lightly tap the crickets into the bag. Some crickets jump in out of order or cling to others, so often customers are given bonus crickets, which we're okay with. It's better than shorting them. So customers are always given the right amount or often more than what they ask for without an increase in price. Most people get this. The customer in the story did not. A woman comes in and she asked for 4 dozen crickets, 48 crickets total. I went to the back, tapped the crickets from the cartons into the funnel, and then counted them into the bag. As per usual, the occasional extra cricket tumbled or hopped in, probably putting the total to a bit over 50 by the time I was done. So I bagged them, tied the bag, and then I took them to the counter. Now, I don't know if this woman was having a bad day or if she'd been stiffed by another store in the past, but she demanded that we count out the crickets in front of her before she pays for them. Now, I explained that this was likely that she got a little more than what she asked for and that counting out 48 crickets individually would take a little while. She insisted and wanted to be sure that we weren't, quote, ripping her off, unquote. So I got one of those small plastic critter keepers and a pair of tongs. I opened the bag, making it deflate and slightly more painful to work with, and inserted the tongs. Delicately so, not to crush the crickets, I grabbed each one with the tongs and started counting slowly so to not crush the crickets with the tongs or to lose my place while counting, which is something I do struggle with. Then I dropped each individually counted cricket into the critter keeper. So after about 5 to 10 minutes at the counter, meticulously counting crickets with tongs and maybe deliberately taking a little bit longer than I had to out of spite, a line was building up behind the woman and I was getting close to the end of my count. Eventually, I hit the grand total of what she paid for, 48 crickets. And wouldn't you believe it, there were 10 left over in the bag, almost a whole extra free dozen that she would have gotten had she not asked me to count. I said, "Oh, would you look at that? My mistake. You were right. I did miscount. I'll put these other ones back and ring you up for the 48. I'll be right back." And before she could protest, I wandered off to dump the last 10 crickets back into the cricket container. When I came back to check her out, she was silent, not looking at me. She did her best to ignore the irritated looks of the customers lining up behind her while I poured her 48 crickets back into a plastic bag. She paid and then slunk off sheepishly out the door without a thank you or a glance back. I then got through the rest of the line quickly and apologized to the customers in line for the wait. I sent them home with some free samples, thanked them for their patience, and then continued along with my shift. She never complained, and she did return to the location several times after. She never asked anyone to count crickets again. Just Undo That Knot, posted by application Mobile 492. When I was a teenager, I spent my summers visiting my mom on one side of the country, and every other year her mom, my Grammy, on the other side of the country. Grammy usually had some project that needed doing, like cleaning gutters or fixing a fence, things like that. This story is from when she wanted some trees to chop down. Volunteer trees, the kind that grow tall and fast, but not thick. They're easily handled with a hacksaw and or hatchet if one knows what they're doing. As will become apparent, I was not qualified for that description. Grammy hired a neighborhood teen to help out, and the two of us tackled the first and smallest of the 3 trees. This was when I learned that I was the most qualified of the 2 of us, so I was in charge of planning. Shockingly, the first tree went smoothly, and we learned how well that we worked together. Second tree, no problems. We're feeling like we have a handle on things. We get to the 3rd tree, and just like we did before, we tied a rope towards the top of the tree and tied it off to an old stump to guide the tree or to prevent an accident, and we got to work chopping into the trunk of the tree. We realized we had a problem when the rope went tight. Backing off to assess the situation, we were a little baffled how the tree started falling the way it did, but accepted that, if not for the rope, we would have just dropped this tree onto the nearby fence and Grammy's truck just beyond it. As we were discussing how to get the tree to fall the direction we wanted, Grammy came out to see what the holdup was. We get as far as pointing out the rope when she utters the line, "Oh, I see the problem. You used the wrong type of knot. You needed a slip knot so you could tighten it up as you went." No, that's not the problem. The problem is, here, undo that knot. I'll show you how to tie a proper knot. Nothing we could say could dislodge that idea that we just needed a proper knot. So, confirming what had happened the next was directly Grammy's fault, we undid the knot. The knot that was holding up a whole tree. Grammy was halfway into the first step of whatever knot she wanted us to tie before she realized why we weren't listening to her. All 3 of us watched as this tree fell nice and slow onto the fence. With a mighty crack, the trunk separated from the stump and the tree continued tipping directly onto the roof of Grammy's truck. Silence. Then, finally realizing what we had tried to tell her, Grammy lets out a hearty laugh. "Okay, I was wrong. Now finish the job and get the tree off my car." Want me to cook your steak a little longer than everyone else's? Okay. Posted by Amadeus Jericho. Let me start this off by saying I am crappy at cooking steak. Not this isn't edible anymore bad, but accidentally over or undercooked it bad. I can never get that perfect medium rare, and if I do, it's a dang miracle. Everyone in my household likes medium rare steaks, as I'm sure many people do. Most of the time, I end up undercooking them, which isn't a big deal because I can just cook them a little longer. However, it seems to go from rare to well done in a very short amount of time. I don't know if the steak gods hate me or what. My mom always brings up my bad steak cooking skills, and it kind of peeves me off. I'm just trying my best, and no one else in the family complains. Just her. Now, before anyone says, why doesn't your mom cook? Or why can't she make her own food? My mom is disabled, and she can barely stand long enough to make a sandwich without being in a lot of pain. My brother and dad work all day, so I'm the only one left to cook dinner every night. It's been this way for years. And yes, even though I've been cooking for years, I still can't perfect a steak. Anyway, today I was making steak for dinner. I was very confident that today would be the day that I get a perfect medium rare. As I was just finishing up the steaks, my mom chimes in with, "Can you cook mine a little longer than the rest of them?" from the living room. Now, today's just an off day for me. I don't know why, I just don't have the best mood today, and I've got a little PO'd that she asked me that because I guess she would just assume that I'm going to make it too rare for her. She wants it to be cooked longer? Fine. I take 2 of the steaks off the heat to rest while I keep hers cooking. As I'm pre-cutting my steak, I like it pre-cut, don't judge me, I noticed something. Could it be the perfect medium rare that I've been dreaming of? Yes, it's perfect. A perfect medium rare. I was delighted. After I'd finished cutting my steak, I take my mom's steak off the heat to rest. I wasn't going to completely butcher this steak because it was a very nice cut of steak and I wouldn't want to ruin it, so it's still very juicy. But as I was cutting her steak, again, because she's disabled, I see that it was definitely well done. In the end, when I served it up, I told her, too bad you wanted yours cooked longer. Yours is now well done instead of medium rare like the rest. I unfortunately didn't get the reaction I was hoping for, as she seemed pretty content with it. But I hope she stops asking me now. You don't want us to cook? Alrighty then. Posted by Pardon This Name's Taken. I've been thinking about posting this story for a while, and I just decided to commit. It brings a smile to my face, so here goes. When my brother and I were younger, 10 and 12, our parents had a rule that, other than using the microwave, we could not cook without a parent present. We can prep what we wanted to cook, but we were not to so much as touch that stove or oven. We tried it once and got fussed at. That's all it took. One summer, he and I wanted to make home fries, but our mother was at work and our father had just stepped out to do errands. I want to make home fries. Wait a minute, pardon, Mom and Dad said that we couldn't cook when they're not here. Now, let me interject with a little context about me. I was a smart aleck kid, and it got me in trouble often. So the inner workings of my mind on this day were bent toward mischief. They didn't say we couldn't cut it up, though. Wonder Twin Malicious Compliance activate. We then went to work, and then peeled and cut up and seasoned the potatoes before putting them in a bowl, covering the bowl with foil and placing it in the fridge. My brother and I looked at each other and said, wouldn't it be funny if Dad came home and ate raw potatoes, but said they were good even though they were raw? Now for a little more context, my dad was notorious for going into the refrigerator and eating whatever food he felt like eating, regardless of whose it was. We laughed hysterically at the thought for about 10 minutes before going back to play Sega. About 2 hours go by and then my dad came home. As expected, he went to the refrigerator and pulled out the bowl of raw potatoes. We heard the rustle of the foil and immediately went to the kitchen to watch what he was going to do. He ate a potato and said, "Oh, this is raw. It tastes good though, but why didn't you cook it?" We reminded him that he said we couldn't cook if there wasn't a parent in the house. He chuckled and got out the skillet. That rule didn't last much longer in the house, and he began teaching us how to cook more. Work during my planned vacation, then you have to pay me extra when I leave. Posted by Shabuti. Here we go. I'd been working at this company for about 3 years. I'd been consistently growing in my role and eventually was given a project to own with 1 or 2 other team members if needed, but it was a major project with a quick turnaround. I determined that I could do it myself, though it would be tight, and since I was hoping for a promotion, I took on the project solo. I was able to deliver the project slightly ahead of schedule and with better quality than expected, which allowed us to make a huge sale. The head of the company gave me an award at an all-hands meeting for the work I did, and my boss let me know I was on track for an end-of-year promotion with a nice pay raise and more responsibilities. But I was needed in another part of the business, so I was going to have to transfer under a new manager that was notoriously hard to work with. I transferred to this manager, and the first meeting we had to get on the same page, I brought up that I had a 3-week planned vacation in 4 months. I had never taken vacation, so I had 6 weeks saved up and I didn't want to start losing it. He told me, of course, that it would be fine and we would be able to make it work. About a week later, we have our first meeting with our product team. They had a new large project idea and wanted it to be released in just 3 months. As my team looked over the details, we knew this was a 6 to 8 month project at best, and it would be better to deliver it in smaller increments so that they still had something to show in 3 months, or we would need to push out the schedule. My boss was adamantly against both, so throughout the next week, he made us have last-minute 3 to 4 hour brainstorming sessions every day, but he would not even tell us until around 3 p.m., forcing all of us to work late every day that week. At the end of the week, there was no way we could figure out how to deliver everything on the shorter timeline, and so my boss asked me to stay behind after the meeting. For another hour, he railed against me, saying I was failing at this project and that he could not see me getting a good annual review in the next 4 months and that a promotion wasn't even on the table. This annual review would also include the project that I had just received an award for and is supposed to encompass 12 months of work, but he was basing this off the first 2 weeks on the new team. At this point, I knew he was ready to use me as a scapegoat for his bad management and started applying elsewhere. We continued working on the project and, sure enough, at the end of 3 months, we were still far from being able to deliver and my boss was getting heat from up above. Right around this time, I received an offer for another company that would be the promotion I wanted and an even larger pay increase. I accepted the offer and negotiated my start date to be after my vacation, which was now 3 weeks away. That same day, my boss calls me into his office and tells me, "We need to talk about this vacation." I reminded him that we talked about it months before and that everything is booked, flights, hotels, and so on. He would not let up and told me there was no way that I could take 3 weeks off with how behind schedule we are. He told me I could go on my trip, but I could not take vacation and would be expected to be online during our business hours throughout the trip, 4 a.m. to 1 p.m. local time in my vacation spot. Cue malicious compliance. Every morning while on vacation, I would log on at 4 a.m., check emails, answer questions on our internal chat, and do the minimum work expected, logging off as soon as it hit 1 p.m., all without burning any vacation. With 1 week left in my vacation, I requested a conference call with my boss to give him my 2 weeks notice. He was shocked and tried everything to get me to stay and finish out the project, including bringing back up a possible promotion. I told him that I'd already accepted a job with the start date upcoming. I worked my last 2 weeks before moving on to my new job. Because my boss required me not to take vacation, the company had to pay out all of my accrued vacation once I left, which was a little less than 7 weeks at that point, including the 3 weeks I had originally planned to take. Now short-staffed, I heard from other coworkers that the project missed 2 more adjusted deadlines, and eventually the manager was demoted before being let go from the company. About 6 months later, the head of the first company asked me to lunch to offer me a role taking over my former boss's old position. I negotiated an even higher pay raise increase as well as company equity and ended up going back there for 3 years. Vacation is vacation. You don't work on it unless it's an absolute crazy emergency, if that, and then to have it pulled out under the rug like that, oh man. Malicious compliance, 10 out of 10 from me. You want me to fly 12 hours earlier because it's cheaper? Posted by Warm Tomato 2126. I, a 56-year-old male in the UK, was working in Africa as an operations manager for a large global security company from 2009 to 2014. The company I was working in had been through a long civil war and was very underdeveloped. Think like no paved roads, people living in very traditional African lifestyle, so on. At the time, I'd been working there on 10 weeks in country, 2 weeks at home rotation for about 4 years. I'd flown to and from work so often that I had the journey down to the bare minimum travel time, and it worked out the cheapest option for the company because the travel days were paid from when I left home. The shorter my journey, the cheaper it worked out for the company. Now, someone in the head office had looked at cutting down on travel costs, probably to make themselves look good and get promoted. As a result, I got an email after a week at home saying that they had changed my normal flight, which was 5 p.m. on Sunday from my nearest UK airport via Amsterdam, then on to Nairobi, connecting with a 9 a.m. flight to the war-torn country on Monday morning. The change was from a 5 p.m. departure to a 5 a.m. departure the same day, same route, and saving about 80 pounds. Now to clarify, the 9 a.m. flight from Nairobi was the first flight to the war-torn country because the destination airport was the only surfaced runway in the country. It had no runway lights or radar, so all flights had to be in daylight. Anyway, I agreed to the flight time change, but they had to move it to Monday so I don't lose a day at home, which all become clear in a moment. They had agreed because it still saved 80 pounds on the ticket. No skin off their nose. Once I got the flight confirmation, I contacted the travel desk asking for hotel and taxi bookings. When they asked why, I said that I need these, and I explained that to make a 5 a.m. departure, it required a check-in at 3 a.m. So I needed a hotel at the airport on Sunday night because no trains were running to get up the 3 hours to the airport from home at that time of the morning. The flights they booked would get me into Nairobi for 7 p.m. after dark, so I'd need a hotel there and a taxi each way to and from the hotel to get me onto the 9 a.m. flight on Tuesday, the same flight I would have been on if I'd left at 5 p.m. but a day later. A couple days go by and I got a phone call from the company travel desk telling me that the travel plan was confirmed. I was on the 5 a.m. flight with a hotel reservation at my UK airport the night before, a hotel in Nairobi after landing, and my taxi would collect me in Nairobi and drop me off at the airport for my final connection. I asked about the cost savings. They said 80 pounds. I then asked about the hotels and taxis. They replied, "Oh, they don't come out of our budget, that's the operations budget, so you're fine." I was happy. I was arriving back at work a day later, still paid the same amount with a night out in Nairobi to sweeten the deal. My boss, on the other hand, went nuts. Nobody had told him of the changes. My deputy flew out on the plane I flew in on, meaning I didn't get a handover of the work that was going on. On top of that, of the cost of the hotels, the taxi, and the extra day's pay had all come out of my boss's operational budget. I think the total amount added was almost 1,000 pounds. But hey, they saved 80 pounds on that flight cost. When companies split their budgets up like this and they want to save money and they don't think about the whole big picture, this happens. Way to go, OP. Stop fixing the photo printers during Christmas rush? Sure, why not? Posted by the audiophile. To preface, I used to work in the photo lab of a very prevalent retail pharmacy. You know the one. I was good, fast, efficient, and had always provided the most excellent customer service. Customers loved me. I adapted official procedures to make them better and improve the final project, and I fixed the photo printers. If you've worked in a 1-hour photo lab, you know that no one fixes those things. They jam constantly, overheat, never get replaced or updated. They'd break at least weekly, if not more. Same thing with the kiosk and receipt printers and POS system. It's a nightmare. I haven't worked there since 2017 and they finally updated the pin pads 6 years later. Because the printers would break so often and I had experience fixing printers from when I worked at a school, I'd just whip out a screwdriver, open them up, and fix them myself. It was faster and easier than putting in a ticket, and it meant that I could keep churning out orders during peak instead of being 1 to 2 printers down at all times. Now, shortly before the holidays, we got a new AM. He'd previously managed another store, but had to step into a less stressful position due to a heart issue. The guy was a prick, and he created stress for himself. He treated team members like garbage, and most people were too afraid to stand up to him. I had a good working relationship with our GM, so I was not afraid of this guy, and he would often single me out because of it. At one point during Christmas rush, he caught me with my metaphorical pants down, screwdriver out, and disassembling a printer that had suddenly stopped working. He chewed me out, told me to stop fixing the printer immediately and just put in a ticket. If he caught me fixing a printer again, he'd have to take disciplinary action. Cue malicious compliance. I stopped fixing the printers and just put in tickets. In about a day, we were down to one functioning 4x6 printer that was overworked to heck and back. That printer almost caught fire while I was off shift because no one was able to unjam it. He never told me to stop fixing the printers again and left me alone the entire rest of the time that I worked there. I ended up being wrongfully terminated due to an ADA leave for a major surgery when corporate never got my paperwork, despite my PT faxing it over, and I found a better job that I love at a company I still work for. brick manager ended up getting fired several months later for customer complaints. This right here, if you ever see an incident of management not understanding what the workers are doing, this is it. You just totally told a worker to stop doing something that they were really good at and helping the company just because you didn't know. OP, you win. They lose, you win. Right? Am I right here? Surely I'm not the only one. Don't expect me to follow some of your rules and ignore others, posted by Faithlessness Type 45. In the 90s, I was working for a company that sold pagers and airtime. You know how long it takes at the cell phone store to buy and activate a new phone? It took that long or longer to activate a pager. I was the lowest person paid on the premise and the only hourly employee. Quite often, I would be helping customers as 5 p.m. came and went, and sometimes had as much as an hour overtime on my time card. When I was hired, I was given an employee handbook that stated that working off the clock was a fireable offense, so I kept careful track of my hours, which were verified by my supervisor. I did this for about a month before both my supervisor and her boss advised me that I could not put in for overtime any longer. I asked my supervisor what I was supposed to do at 5 o'clock, continue working the counter or work off the clock. She was furious, but told me to leave, and I did, every day at 5 o'clock on the dot. OP, you did right. They told you to go, you go. Get paid overtime, you're not working off the clock, that's just crazy, right? Only do what's in my job title? Fine, good luck paying employees. By Epic Sausage 69. So I work for a construction company as an inventory admin. My job is to basically schedule counts of our warehouse and input the numbers they give me for inventory. Then try to see what the problem is when the numbers on the last count and the current count don't add up. There's a little bit more to it, but I won't bore you with the specifics. The problem with this job is that when you have been doing it long enough and are good at it, there's less work to do. In the beginning, when counting one rack out of 60 racks of material would take a few days, it was fine because I was always busy. But now that everything is in order, the entire warehouse can be counted in 3 days. This leaves me bored for most of the time. So to fix this, I studied up on our cloud-based ERP service that we use for all internal and external transactions and have become sort of an expert on it. Every single aspect of this company uses this ERP service to do their job. Timesheets, HR, payroll, accounting, scheduling, management, manufacturing, ordering from vendors, delivering inventory, and so on. All runs through this ERP service. So it's very important that this service is up and running perfectly 24/7. I became so proficient in this service that our VP decided to cut ties with our consultants of the ERP because I could do what they did, but better, quicker, and much cheaper. For reference, we were paying these consultants $5,000 a month just to be on standby if we needed them for some sort of problem that could arise from using the ERP, and had to dish out more money to fix those problems depending on how many hours of their time was spent to fix said problems. Not sure on their exact rate, but it was something like $200 an hour, and they took weeks to fix anything, while I could fix the problem in time for my daily afternoon number 2 break. I never got an official job title or raise of any kind for being an expert on this service. The company just saw me being able to do it and let me fix things that happened, so they no longer needed the outside help. I wasn't too upset because it gave me something to do, so I was glad to help the company save money, even if none of that money fell my way. Skip ahead a few months. We now have a new warehouse manager, and someone in the warehouse messes up something in inventory by sending a bunch of materials to the wrong job with no records of it being shipped. We are talking $500,000 screw up here. In the same day, our ERP had an update that caused a bunch of bugs with our accounting department. So I decided to work on the ERP problem first because the warehouse screw up is more of a daily screw up and not actually stopping anybody from doing their job at the moment, while this accounting problem means our bills are not able to be paid. You can guess what kind of issues we'll have if bills are not paid. The ERP bugs turn out to be quite big and numerous, so it ends up taking me a couple days to figure out. But I can fix it before any bills are actually due, and decided to take lunch a little early to celebrate a victory. Crisis averted. New warehouse manager storms into my office after I get back from lunch and is livid. Apparently, the bosses were pinning the blame on him for the warehouse screw up. And considering he is the one who oversees shipments and personnel in the warehouse, the blame is rightfully placed. He starts laying into me, asking why I have not fixed this problem yet, yelling and screaming like a child. I tried explaining that I was fixing an ERP issue and have not had time to look at the warehouse problem yet. He gets even more angry and notes that it's funny how I have time to take early lunches but not to do my job. That started to tick me off, but I held my tongue and kept calm about the situation. He then ordered me to only do what is in my job title and to leave the ERP BS to the people competent enough to handle it, as he put it. Since this guy was technically my supervisor, I had no choice but to obey. I asked him to send me that in writing, and he snarks and storms back into his office. 5 minutes later, I get an email stating that under no circumstances am I to work on anything related to the ERP unless it involves inventory. Cue malicious compliance. I do nothing but inventory from that point forward, knowing dang well that we would be essentially coasting until we hit a problem that I would refuse to fix. Sure enough, not even a week later, I get an email from HR that some sort of bug in the ERP system was preventing them from accessing payroll to pay employees this week. I reply in apology that I am no longer able to work on ERP bugs due to supervisor and to refer to the ERP system help guide for further assistance. I knew the help guide was not going to help her in the slightest, but it was no longer my problem, so I was not going to deal with it. Skip a few days later to Friday. I checked my bank account in the morning before getting to work and laughed because there was no money deposited. That problem never got fixed. I hurry up and get to work, excited to see the chaos unfold. And what I was expecting was an understatement. When I show up to work, I see the entire warehouse staff of 50 people walking out the front door. I stopped one and asked why they're leaving, and he replied with, "I didn't get paid today, so I'm not coming back until I do." I go into the office and see the warehouse manager in a panic. He has jobs that need material and nobody to load it onto trucks or deliver. I ask him if he needs help with anything, and he just screams at me to leave his office because he's getting phone calls out the butt from superintendents of jobs asking why our material has not arrived yet. I pass by HR on the way to my office and see a bunch of the bosses huddled up over her computer with their angry and confused expressions on their face, I guess trying to figure out the problem. I felt bad for her because it really was something out of her control, but I knew she would ultimately be okay because she had been there for so long that they would never fire her. When I get to my office, I see the VP waiting for me there. He has a very ticked off expression on his face. When we get inside, he demands to know why I did not fix the problem in HR when she emailed me about it. I replied that I'm no longer allowed to work on ERP problems as it's not in my job title. He has the most shocked look on his face and asks why all of a sudden I had a change of heart. I show him the email from warehouse manager and I could see the dots connect in his head. He immediately storms out and I see him heading straight to the warehouse manager's office. They were in there for a few hours, but eventually he comes back to my office. He seems calmer now and asks me politely if I can fix the problem in HR and if I can resume fixing the ERP if needed. At this point, I liked the relief of responsibility and told him I would only do it if he put it officially in my job title along with a raise. His calmness turned to anger again and he says, "I cannot believe you," as he storms out and returns to his office. A few hours later, he sends out a mass email that he has hired the old ERP consultants to fix the problem and that next week everyone would be paid for the money they are owed along with the money they earned if they return to work. This one surprised me as he would rather pay over $60,000 a year to consultants than give me a few extra bucks an hour for better work. I think he expected me to change my mind and just do it for my own paycheck, but I decided to wait because I know how these consultants were, and if they managed to fix this problem in a week, I would streak naked through the office. Most of the warehouse staff agreed to return, but were still upset about not getting paid. Sure enough, next Friday comes around. Nobody gets paid again. At this point, it's becoming a real problem and the entire staff is becoming agitated. They have bills to pay. I even heard a bunch of the warehouse talking about some competitors nearby they could go work for. At this point, I even considered just fixing the problem because the warehouse didn't deserve to be treated like that due to poor management. Maybe I'm the a-hole here for this, but I'm severely underpaid and I can barely afford my apartment. There's no reason I should do extra work for free. That same day, the VP returns to my office and hands me papers. These papers said that I would be promoted to a newly created position that dealt with inventory and ERP upkeep. It would be its own department and he would be my direct supervisor, and it also came with a hefty raise. All I had to do was sign and agree. I looked up at him after reading the paper, and he had the saddest look on his face. Look, please just sign it. The consultant said it would take them weeks to get around to fixing it due to the high volume of the clients they've taken on, and we can't keep skipping paychecks. I happily signed it and immediately got to work on the HR issue. Managed to fix it that same day. It was just a simple problem with the permissions of HR and payroll in the ERP due to the update. Boom, OP took that horizontal promotion, shifted it right up to vertical, had a better lifestyle, more raise, and just everybody wins here if your name is OP. Nice job, dude. 3 separate bags, posted by Ancient Educator 76. As some of you may know, I work at a Mindy's drive-thru. There's been a lot of changes lately that frustrates the customers, the employees, and then another vicious cycle of customer-employee frustration for a cascade of various other reasons. It's like a beautiful waterfall that's running directly over the front of your face, making your lower lip come down, making you look weird and ugly, and you can't breathe because of the constant flow of water. It seems like it could be something good, but it all depends on where you're standing. The drive-thru people are standing at the worst possible spot, pummeled by our beautiful water. But I digress. A lady orders 3 baggy bags, which has got to be one of the funniest wrong names for products since that time a guy called the Baconator a Terminator. I ask her which ones. We have 3 options, and she says, a baggy bag, you know, the only one you have? Wow, we're off to a swimming start. At this point, I would usually be sarcastic, snide, or petty, but I've been learning from these YouTube videos how to interact with people properly, so this has helped me get rid of, or at least postpone, this sort of behavior in myself. I found it very helpful for moments like these, and I use this newfound social knowledge to simply explainagize that we have 3 options to choose from: the Boonier Jakin Bees Churger, the Stubble Dak, or the Kispy Cricken BLT. She said, the Stubble Dak, duh! Oh, and you idiots always never listen to me. You need to put those things in 3 separate bags. Okay. Now she called me an idiot, and I really don't want to lose my crap, and my coworker can feel it in my voice, trying not to sigh and giving myself a breathing problem as a result. She helped me deflect by saying, oh my goodness, can you believe this woman? Sounds like my aunt. I hate my aunt. With a little help from my friends, I don't say what I want to say and say, separate bags, you say? Preposterous. I just simply go, separate bags? You got it. I said it the way I would describe what I had for breakfast, another thing I learned from Tom Hardy. She then replies, look, MFer, 3 separate bags, and drove off screeching her car, which hurt my ear immensely. This really set me off. Even if I wanted to say something back to this lady, I couldn't. I saw her car swing around the bend and almost hit the car in front of her. My ears were still ringing. Time for some much needed malicious compliance. 3 separate bags? You got it. So the baggy bag comes with the drink, fries, nuggets, and a sandwich of your choosing. I beg Bruce, my manager, to let me bag this one. He heard that BS this lady said, so he reluctantly nodded and waved his hand toward the station. I wash my hands, glove up faster than I ever have before, and put all the fries in one bag, all the burgers in the second bag, and all the nuggets in the third bag. She gets to the window, and the driver looks very pleasant. Not what I expected. The passenger, not so much. She leans over the nice one and says, y'all got that in 3 separate bags? Sam, my cohort, hands the bags out and says, yep, 1 to 3. The driver looks in the bags and tries to hide a smile while shaking her head, turns to the passenger who looks in the bags and says, are you freaking serious? Oh my gosh. She yells at the driver to say, just go, and the driver screeches off again, still smiling. It's kinda nice to ruin one person's day while making another's. Who am I kidding? They'll probably forget about this 10 minutes later. I never will, though. Oh, person, please be nice to OP, making your food, giving you in your 3 separate bags as you requested, and please do not be a Karen today, or well, any other day for that matter. Is anybody else hungry now? HOA tried to punish us, told us to stop them if we can. Malicious Compliance cost them 16% of the annual HOA income, and the cameras are still installed today. Posted by First Contribution 236. This happened several years ago and is a multi-year long story. I'll keep it as succinct as possible. We installed cameras in front of our home that were looking at our vehicles. Part of the camera angles did overlook parts of 2 neighbors' properties, 1 backyard and 1 side yard. The cameras were battery operated and had a function where you could gray out areas that you didn't want to film. When motion occurred in the grayed out areas, the cameras would not be activated to film. The neighbor's entire properties and several bushes on our property were grayed out. We did this when installing them. One of the neighbors was a friend and had no issues with this whatsoever. We actually showed her the camera angle and she said she didn't care whether or not we grayed out that area. We still left it grayed out over battery life concerns. The other neighbor's name was Karen. Not really, but we all know why I chose that name. Karen was on the HOA board and, as you can imagine, we didn't get along with Karen or the HOA board. We told Karen about the camera and showed her the grayed out areas at the same time that we told our friendly neighbor about it. It was simply an FYI conversation, and we're not on friendly terms, not an asking permission conversation. She told us to take the cameras down immediately or we would regret it. About a week after we hung the camera up, we got a notice from our HOA that we were violating the bylaws. The bylaw in question? A nuisance to your neighbors bylaw. There wasn't a specific bylaw preventing placement of cameras, so this is all they could find to try to punish us. We responded with a letter detailing how we were not violating any bylaws or laws in general, and asked them to cease and desist. We all know how these stories go though. They did not cease, and they did not desist. Their first response? The HOA has the right to enforce these bylaws. Try to stop us if you think you can. These types of responses were, unfortunately, quite common from this board. We entered this battle with one goal in mind, to cost them as much money and time as possible. The HOA hired a lawyer specifically to fight us. To my knowledge, this has not happened to any other residents. In the following 4 months, we ended up costing the HOA over $4,000 in lawyer's fees fighting this battle. For reference, the entire HOA income was around $25,000 per year. When it came time for our official HOA hearing over the matter, we had successfully postponed it, thanks to an attorney friend, 3 separate times. There were over 100 back and forth emails with the HOA attorney and ourselves. Each one of those emails was a 15-minute expense for the HOA, and I was happy to follow up a follow-up question with another follow-up question if it meant the HOA attorney was going to keep billing them. Did I say follow up enough times? Anyway, we didn't actually want to take this battle to court, so we ended up removing the cameras the day of the hearing to prevent being fined, even if the fine wouldn't hold up in court. The HOA decided in the hearing that we were guilty, surprise, surprise, of violating the bylaw. They couldn't fine us, as the bylaws don't allow a fine until after a hearing has been held, and the cameras were already removed. In the end, the punishment was a sternly written piece of paper on the attorney's letterhead, delivered via certified mail, that stated we were, quote, not allowed to place a camera on our home that had the potential to invade a neighbor's privacy, end quote. Keep in mind, the letter specifically stated that the camera could not be placed on our home. We left the cameras off of the home for about 4 months, until the annual HOA meeting. You should have seen the look on the HOA board's faces when I asked them to explain the $4,000 line item for attorney's fees that simply stated, title searches, attorney fees. The board actually tried to hide the fact that they spent $4,000 trying to fight us over a couple of cameras by putting the fees in as title searches. Needless to say, that meeting did not go well for them. About half of them lost their positions on the board. The other half, including Karen, unfortunately, remained on the board. About a week after the annual meeting, we installed new cameras, facing the same direction as the prior cameras, only this time we installed a post in the ground and mounted the cameras to that post. The admonishment we received after the hearing specifically stated that we were not allowed to install cameras on our home, and said nothing about putting them on a post. They did send a letter to try and tell us to remove the cameras, but a sternly worded response indicating that we were prepared to fight them actually worked this time around. I guess they didn't want to spend another $4,000 fighting us. We didn't receive any follow-up responses, and the cameras on the post are still installed to this day, over 2 years and running strong. Oh man, you just gotta love it when an OP knows the book by the letter and sticks it to the Karen and ends up coming out the winner, stalling and delaying the whole way home. A student's malicious compliance backfires. Posted by Kipsy Cakes. This is a story from one of my college friends, Zach, and how he one day decided to jokingly comply with the professor's request, only to have it shot right back in his face. So, for quick background, Zach and I were both students in our university's department for fields such as animation, game design, and film. Since Zach and I studied similar fields, Zach studied game design and I studied animation, we were both required to take a series of classes called 3D modeling with a professor I'll call Professor Rick. Rick was a one-of-a-kind professor who was not only experienced in the field, but also a very understanding and approachable man who knew how to make the subject fun and easy for all of us. 3D modeling, as you'd probably expect, was a very project-heavy class. Each month or so, you'd be assigned a project. Let's say, for example, the project is a fully detailed and functioning lamp model, which you would work on both in and out of class throughout the month. You'd also be required to submit your current progress online each week for feedback and an easy A as long as you had shown you were making progress. Classes would usually be spent talking about the next part of the project and then working on them. As long as you were actually doing the work, listening to Rick's feedback, and actively improving, the class was an easy A. Pretty simple, right? Anyway, the story begins about a week after one of these projects started. One day, Zach's laptop suddenly had massive technical issues and needed to be repaired. While he was assured the issue could and would be fixed, he wouldn't be able to get the laptop back before the following week, after the deadline for the upcoming progress report was due. Not only was this a problem because Zach couldn't access the progress he had already made on the project, but also because these projects required a very specific type of software that you couldn't access on any normal school computer. These projects also required hours to work on, so he couldn't just borrow a laptop to use to finish the project. So, Zach had no choice to talk to Professor Rick about his issue. Thankfully, Rick understood what was going on because, like any person would in this industry, he knew how unpredictable technology could be and that the issues tended to happen. On top of that, he knew already that Zach had been working on his project in class, so he knew Zach wasn't lying. So, when Zach asked what he could do for the upcoming progress report, Professor Rick said, "Well, just submit whatever you've got and I'll grade it. Don't worry about it." Now, Zach knew what Professor Rick probably wanted. Since we were required to submit progress reports each week, Zach could have easily used a campus computer to download a previous file and resubmit it with no issue. However, Zach had another idea. See, Zach is a huge fan of dry humor. So is Professor Rick. So Zach thought it would be funny to submit something different for Professor Rick instead of what he'd expect. So he submitted a simple one-page Word document with "sorry" in big letters written in the middle. He then left a comment attached to the submission saying, "Sorry, I didn't think you'd care what I turned in, so I gave you this." Zach then moved on with his day. Professor Rick said nothing to him about it, and about a week passed. Like I mentioned before, most of these projects were guaranteed A's, so when Zach saw the notification that the grade was submitted, he didn't think to check it right away. Then, one day, while looking through the app we use to submit our work, he noticed something off. His grade for 3D modeling, which was once an A, was now a C-. He was completely confused, and upon investigating what could be the cause, he noticed one grade that looked very different. The progress report received a grade of -200 out of 100. Zach was absolutely stunned. How the heck was a negative score even possible? He quickly checked the submission and saw underneath his comment was a reply from Professor Rick that said, "Sorry, I didn't think you'd care what grade I gave you, so I just gave you this instead." Zach panicked, thinking he made Professor Rick angry, and as soon as the next class started, he approached the professor with his laptop open to the grade to ask what the heck was happening. But before he could speak, Professor Rick saw the grade, saw Zach's face, and started laughing. He laughed hard. Zach then realized what was going on and started laughing too. The grade was changed to a 100 of 100 the very next day. Gosh, I genuinely loved my professors. Professor Rick sounds like a guy you'd want to hang out with and have a beer with. I don't like beer, and he's a college professor, so he probably shouldn't. But he just sounds like a good guy, don't you think so? But the trick was definitely a little bit scary, for sure. Want to lie about your natural hair color? Have fun with an awful dye job. Posted by Wisconsin, Ohio native 9. My wife, 22, and I, 22, got my little sister, 12, some semi-permanent red hair dye for Christmas. She really wanted it and was very excited to use it on herself and her cousins. The hair dye is bright red, assuming you're light blonde or bleached, but sis had dark brunette hair, so the dye becomes a dark burgundy on her. Everything that follows is what she told me. I wasn't there for any of it. Sis brought her hair dye to family Christmas at Grandma's so she could share it with our plethora of cousins. One of our cousins, Anna, 16, is pretty entitled. She's a compulsive liar and manipulator. I keep my audio recording app handy on my phone when I'm around her, should I have to use it, because I don't trust her. She also has done some mild bullying and take advantage of sister in the past year or two. Anna asked sis to have her hair dyed. Anna obviously has had her hair bleached to a medium light or a light blonde. Sis asked Anna, hey, is your hair bleached or dyed? If it is, then it's going to turn out really bright and look crazy. Anna said, no, what? This is my natural hair color. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. Sis and my other cousins share a knowing look before getting to work. After they let the paste sit for a reasonable amount of time, they wash it out. Instead of pretty mauve accents like in Sis's hair, the back of Anna's hair looks like a bright, clowny, patchy mashup. Anna's response, I kid you not, was to look surprised and say, oh yeah, I did bleach my hair. I totally forgot this wasn't my natural hair color. At this moment, Anna's mother came in and was not happy. Anna wanted to take even more dye from my sister to try to even out the clown hair she'd given herself, but Anna's mom stood up for my sister and wouldn't let her take more. This dye is only semi-permanent, but it'll still take 10 to 15 shampoos to be fully washed out. I only learned all this because I took my sister out on a breakfast date after New Year's. I was worried that Anna had bullied sis into using as much hair dye as she did. When I asked about it, it turns out sis just wanted to let Anna pay for her obvious lie. Kids are honest. I mean, they'll tell you what they think even if it's not socially acceptable, and they'll tell you what you maybe sometimes don't want to hear. Ouch. What do you think? Way to go, OP. If I have to do it, you have to do it too. Posted by Defrost. This happened years ago with my ex. They're an ex for a reason. My ex and I had a long-distance relationship for a number of years. We would fight very often, and I always blamed it on the long distance. What I told myself was that we are both so stressed from the long distance, and the stress leads us to fighting all the time. After a couple years of long distance, she moved in with me after she got a new job in the state that I lived at. We lived in a small 1-bed, 1-bath, but it was big enough for the both of us. Unfortunately, we continued to fight even more so than when we were long distance. One time, I came back from the gym. I was super tired. Went to the bathroom to pee, and I get some food after, and so on. Well, because I was tired, I forgot to put the toilet seat down. This one time. I always put down both the seat and the lid. It just so happened that I didn't do it this time. She comes into the bathroom after me and makes the biggest deal about putting the toilet seat down, how I don't care about her, and so on. I didn't want to get into a huge fight over nothing, so I simply said, hey, I'm sorry, I'll make sure to put it down. She pees, and then I go in the shower after her. I noticed the seat was down, obviously, but the toilet lid was still up. She never put the lid down. So malicious compliance kicked into overdrive. I said to her, can you make sure you put the toilet lid down whenever you use the bathroom? And basically repeated everything she had said to me about not caring about her and so on. Petty, sure, but if she's going to make a big stink about something so small, so am I. So she yelled at me and said I was being ridiculous, and I basically repeated everything she said to me right back to her in regards to putting down the toilet seat and the toilet lid. If I have to pick up something and put it back down every time I pee, so do you. You don't get special treatment. This was a huge screaming fight, and she basically said, no, I'm not going to do it. I continued to put the seat and lid down every time, and she never put the lid down, and I would always make sure to tell her she didn't do it, and how it showed that she didn't care. The relationship didn't last much longer after that, and we were just not right for each other. I should have noticed it years prior, but I used the long distance excuse instead of saying that we were a bad match. Oh man, I just feel like there's more to it. I like to see the other side. I feel like there are deeper issues of toxic things that are present, not just toilet seat, like telling her, oh, you don't care about me, and just, I see some red flags here. I'm sorry, OP, but I see him here, man. Want me to unload my own trailer? Okay, I needed a vacation anyway. Posted by Arrow the Observer. So I was a trucker for a while, and that comes with plenty of stories of crazy things in so many places. One of my favorite stories, however, comes from a piece of malicious compliance that came together just perfectly. The setup. I tend to be a bit on the lazy side when I can get away with it, and I searched for quite some time to find a company that would keep me far away from unloading the trailers myself. I found a good one that had a 95% drop and hook rate, which is where you drop off a trailer full of goods and then grab a new one that's either loaded or to take to the next pickup. 4.9% of them are either handled by the receiving dock or by lumpers, which are dock workers hired by the warehouse companies specifically to unload trucks. That 0.1% is a list of places that just want to watch you work or be convinced that you really shouldn't operate their lifts. In my contract, I saw that there was a place where your hourly rate for unloading was stated, not for the hours that you were sitting and waiting to be unloaded, but for when you were the one unloading your own trailer. So I also saw that the contract allowed for alterations to be made to the price of this service to be charged to the customer. As a joke, I put in not one, but 2 extra zeros. $1,500 an hour for unloading a trailer? That should deter most people. Most people saw that, got a good laugh, and then pulled in someone to unload for me. The event. Most people, like I said, were smart. This run was set to arrive at 3 o'clock to a certain clothing store in the mall. Let's call him IB Nickeled. I'd been to the store a few times before, and it was always the same manager, Mr. Dime, receiving me, and it was always the same runaround. If I wanted to get unloaded, I had to wait for someone to get there, and then I'd have to sit and wait while the poor kid back there got the load off, and then I'd have to wait for traffic to ease up to get out, since it was always almost 10:30 by the time I finally left, leaving me with only a couple of hours left on my clock to get to a truck stop for the day. I got there and, yep, Mr. Dime had come in to accept the load. It was always hard to be smart at 3 o'clock, and I can only imagine that was part of Mr. Dime's usual runaround. This time was a bit different for a few reasons. One, he smelled like there was a bit of an herbal calming remedy about him to settle his nerves for the night. Two, he said that he was completely understaffed and there was no one around to unload me, so I'd have to do it myself. 3, I couldn't stay to my usual time because he had to leave before 5 o'clock. To be fair to him, I did try and say, sure, but my contract says, I don't give a dang what your contract states. I don't have anyone in until the store opens, and I've got an appointment that's more important than some trucker's contract. Just unload it yourself. I considered it for a moment and went back up to my truck to get my tablet. This was in 2019, before the virus, and the company had just swapped over to tablets for certain things, like signing off on expenses or getting permissions. Mr. Dime was fuming when I came back and handed him the tablet. Yeah, just read through and sign with your finger. He didn't read through. I had 20 pallets at 1,500 pounds each. The only available tool to unload was a manual pallet jack. I started my work clock and began unloading at 3:15. At 5 o'clock, Mr. Dime looks on in satisfaction to see me about 3/4 of the way through as he's out the door. At 5:15, Mr. Dime's replacement, Mr. Quarter, of the day shift, comes running in with his face white as a sheet to see me taking off the 4th to last pallet. Please tell me that I'm reading this wrong, he pled fruitlessly. I wish I could, I lied, knowing that Mr. Dime was about to be up a muddy creek with a spoon. I even tried telling Mr. Dime what he was getting into, but he just skimmed and signed. He slumped. Wait here, I need to call my district manager. Better be quick. I want to be out of this lot by 6:30 to beat the morning rush and get a good breakfast. He ran back, and I continued unloading. When I finally got the last pallet off at 5:50, I turned off my time clock as the district manager came in. We'll call him Mr. Dollar just to keep consistent, followed by Mr. Quarter, who was looking somewhat relieved, and by Mr. Dime, who was somewhere between terrified and furious. "You're Mr. Arrow?" Mr. Dollar asked, holding a printout and looking to it for the name. "That's me," I agreed. "I take it they sent over the contract Mr. Dime signed?" "Yes, and that's just it. Mr. Dime is accusing you of forging his signature on this, since there's no way he'd sign off on a multi-$1,000 contract just to unload a trailer, especially since he claims you insisted on unloading it yourself." I whistled. Whew, that's a heck of an accusation. Hey, is that the CCTV I see up in the corner over there? I asked, knowing full well that the entire loading dock was covered by a slew of cameras. The one I pointed out was positioned just right to catch the whole conversation at the door. "Mr. Quarter, get the footage," Mr. Dollar said. "We don't have audio, but we do have visual on them." Mr. Dime lost his fury and now just looked petrified. The fallout. One review later, and I was grinning like a loon back to my truck. I called my manager, booked some home time, and walked away with enough money to last to the end of the month. The next time I went into that IB nickeled, there was a new, much more sensible manager who always had a man on staff to unload the trucks. I mean, how do you get any more malicious compliance than this? He said, sign it, read it. He did not sign it and read it. He followed the book by the rules, and now Mr. Dime is probably like Mr. Half a Penny or something. A quarter tank, also posted by Arrow the Observer. So, a while ago, I posted a story about IB nickeled and their nonsense. So, let's go back a bit further now to another story from my first trucking job, in my first 6 months as a trucker. The company I worked for was infamous because every new guy lasted about 90 days. This story is about that company and what got one of my managers fired, all because of a simple request to be fueled on a short haul load. This load was dog food coming over from Sparks, Nevada and dropping at a distribution hub in Sacramento, California. My last load had been dropped a couple days before and I'd been sitting there waiting because I'd requested some home time. I lived in San Bernardino County, California at the time, so yeah, already in a bad mood from that since it killed my vacation days I'd saved up from that time. Lots of stories from this company, but I'll move on since this story is about me getting payback on that guy. So, I've been sitting for a couple of days. It's late August, I've been hot, and I've been running my rig for AC at night. I finally get my dog food load and notice that it doesn't have a fuel stop. The pickup is in 30, so I shoot a message over the Qualcomm unit to ask for a fuel stop. Due to this being a short haul load under 200 miles, you will not be assigned fuel for this load. Oh, cool. My gauge is on a quarter tank, but I'm sure they know that, right? I shoot them that info just to be sure and get no response while I'm picking up my load and getting ready to leave. Finally, I call my manager. Note that it's been around 10 years since then, so apologies for not having the conversation perfectly memorized. "Oh, hey boss, you know I'm heading into Cali, right?" I asked. "I just need a fuel solution." "Ah, you're good, dude. Just get this load done and we can get you fuel." He was, annoyingly as ever, ignoring my concerns. "That's just it. I'm in Nevada at the moment. As soon as I get to California, the price will jump." I tried explaining. "It's only $2.50 over here, but my uncle said it was nearly $5 in Sacramento right now." "Now you just get rolling. I'll figure something out if it's really bad." Well, I tried, and I was feeling particularly mad after the fiasco with my home days. So I set off, doing some mental math. I was loaded pretty heavy and going over one of the more annoying passes in the US. If you've done Donner, you know. I get up to the top of the pass just fine, still a bit over 1/8 tank left. 200 gallons worth of tank, so about 20 gallons at an expected 9 miles to the gallon on the downhill with Jakes at full. Let's do this. Sure enough, I roll down the mountain with just enough gas to get me to my drop on Sacramento's harbor, then have down to the yard just enough gas to get to the 49er truck stop, the only spot my company had for fuel at the time in the area. My engine cuts in and out as I pull into the island. My manager is on for another 5 minutes or so, so I give him a call. "Hey, I just got to the truck stop and my rig is running on fumes. Can I get some fuel?" He was rushed and annoyed since he wanted to get home, just like I wanted to at this point. I still didn't expect what I got. Yeah, just fill up. You're authorized for 220 gallons, so you can get the reefer too if you have a trailer." And with that, he hung up. For those who don't know, August 2012 saw prices through most of California going back up to just over $4 a gallon. The 49er, who had somewhat of a monopoly because they were absolutely massive and the only major brand out there from what I knew at the time, were charging $6.50 or so per gallon. I'd just been given carte blanche for a full tank. I still remember the gallons and the price readout. 203.89 gallons at $1,309.55. Yep, $1,300 on a fill-up that normally costs about $400 on the extreme high end in the rest of the country. I went to bed knowing there would be a storm of epic proportions the next day. I was 21, annoyed, and fully willing to roll with whatever was coming because I was spiteful. Sure enough, I got a call from the night manager before the sun even came up. Arrow, what the frick is this fuel bill? Pull the Qualcomm messages in the call log from last night, I replied before hanging up and falling back asleep. When the sun was up, I had a message on my Qualcomm from my manager's manager, along with a new route directly to my home terminal. My manager had been fired, and they wanted to see me in person to figure out just what was going on. I got there, and after a couple of meetings, they gave me a week off and transferred me to relief and recovery. I have some horror stories from that, but those are for another time. For that day, I had just won against the single most annoying boss I'd ever known and had finally gotten myself a bit of time with my parents and brother, which was good enough for me. Hey, you're just doing your job, you need the gas to do that job, he tells you what to get when you get it, you try to help, he doesn't listen, you're doing it malicious compliantly. One by one, posted by the portable door. I was recently reminded of this story from a colleague. I work in contracts, meaning my department audits signed documents to make sure everything is legal and compliant with our policies. We have a very old system that we use. Think like early DOS, like a black screen with white words and you type everything manually. It looks like Pong. So typically what happens is I would get a contract for specific mechanical equipment and I would review to make sure it's possible in a physical sense and that the finances also make sense. Occasionally, we'll encounter a situation where we need to update our system to allow a contract to go through. This would be if we sold an older equipment that we no longer build but had a few spares lying around. Or if a client bought our equipment from a third-party provider but wants us to service it since we're the official company that makes this stuff. It's kind of like a car dealership selling a used car that they don't make anymore. It's still part of their brand, but they might not necessarily have software to support it since it's so outdated. Trying to explain the best I can. When we have these types of contracts with older equipment, all we have to do is send a note to a person in a specific department and ask her to open the system temporarily to allow these devices to be added and serviced. The way we send this request is that we fill out a form and submit it to this lady. This lady is something. Anyway, she's a combination of a power-hungry overlord and a scared, pathetic mouse. It's very interesting to see. I sometimes play a game to bet on which mode she will respond with. She's very much a bully who cries when she gets called out for being a bully and then says she's being bullied. Yeah, she's fun. So anyways, one day I received 85 new contracts, same client, all for used equipment that we don't make anymore and have not for years. Someone found a whole bunch of them for dirt cheap and bought them and now want us to service them. Cool, good find, Mr. Client, we'll be happy to help. Typically, you submit one request form per device. Filling out the form is a bit of a pain because it's a very manual process and a bit time-consuming. I like to be efficient and make life easier, so I did some reviewing and noticed that there are really only like 5 models of machines. 85 different serial numbers, but only 5 types. So I sent off a quick email saying the following. Hi lady, not her name, but I'm calling her that here. Hey, I have a whole bunch of machines to add to the system, but I don't want to submit 85 different tickets to you. I checked and saw there's only 5 model types. Can I send you the request in batches by model? Might make our lives a bit easier than going one by one. Now, this lady is notorious for sticking to the rules. I don't usually mind because rules exist for a reason. However, they were also created by people and therefore can be changed by people. In this instance, I was hoping lady would understand that I'm trying to save us both some time. Nope. Her response was, "It is unacceptable that you think you have the right to change the way we do things, especially that you don't even work in my department and have no concept of what it is that I do. We do not work however we want. We have procedures to follow, and if you are unfamiliar with these procedures, then it is clear to me that you need training. A new level of which has been achieved. You want me to follow procedures? You don't want to understand that I'm trying to help us both? Let's go then." I spent the next 3 hours creating my emails and ticket requests, but I didn't submit them as I went. Oh no, I waited until I had 85 of them ready to go. Once they were loaded, I spent a hilarious moment clicking send. It was like I was launching little torpedoes every time I clicked send, each causing small devastation as they build up in her inbox and overshadow anything else that might have been in her queue. Also, I know she keeps the volume on, so I know she was hearing that dang ding that has traumatized Outlook users everywhere. One by one, 85 different requests were running to her inbox like moths to a flame. I waited for the inevitable tantrum. Hey, I see you're sending me a bunch of requests. Can you just bunch them together? This is a lot, and it's messing up my system now due to the constant influx of emails and tickets. Did I forget to mention that our laptops are also super old? That many emails in one shot most definitely froze her Outlook for some time. I replied, "Oh, sorry that you're having a hard time. I was just following procedure as per your request. I already sent them all, so nothing I can do." "Well, how many requests did you send?" 85. "What?" I then put my status to out to lunch. "Have fun, lady. I'm getting a sandwich." I don't know about you, but I'd rather have 5 nice, neat, organized emails for work that I need to do rather than 85 spread all out the email, not even one by one lined up. He sent them batch by little bit, so it was like 1, 1, 1, 1. It's so unorganized and messy. What malicious compliance this is. Karen Boss desperately needed my uniform back the next day. No excuses. Posted by deleted. Okay, so a little backstory first. I'm a 20-year-old college student full-time, and I'm doing 23 plus hours a week on top of classes to make ends meet. I live paycheck to paycheck, and I have a car that I am and was paying off. I used to work in a McDonald's in my hometown, but since I moved to live on campus, which was 45 minutes away from my old job, I wasn't willing to make the commute. So I decided to apply and got accepted to a small sandwich shop 10 minutes from my college, which was a blessing. It started out great, plenty of hours, easy work, fast days, till the old manager decided to switch stores. The new manager was one of the biggest Karens you have ever met, like bad, and when I say bad, I really mean it. She completely changed the procedures and made things so much worse. And when I'd have to stay over sometimes 2 or 3 hours after closing, she'd burst in the next day yelling and screaming at the top of her lungs, "Stop staying later. You have to be out by 8:30 and we won't pay you for any time past then." I had no choice because the list that she gave me to do to close out the store alone every night, may I add, was extremely time consuming. Especially with no help, I was expected to stop serving at 8 and do 5 people's worth of work in 30 minutes. It simply wasn't doable. Hearing that I wasn't going to be paid for time that I worked, time I spent making sure everything was done on the list before I left, otherwise I'd be fired for not doing all of it, would go unpaid, as well as I'd be fired if I stayed longer than 8:30. There was no winning. On top of that, the moment management switched, they decided they were giving people too many hours and cut me only 3 hours a week. That went on for 4 weeks till I decided that enough was enough. $45 work weeks wasn't even worth putting in the time and effort to even show up. So, on one of my weekends, I was with my parents off campus. I was due to work that day. 3 hours, of course, my only day that week. I was shopping near said sandwich shop, it's located inside a Walmart, and my mom and I were discussing for the last week how should I just quit, since it seems like they're just trying to fire me without saying they're firing me, wanting me to leave on my own so they wouldn't need to fill out paperwork. Right then and there, I decided, know what? Screw this job, screw my entitled Karen boss. I sent her a text that I quit on the spot and to not expect me to come in that night for my shift. She texts me back ranting about how since I'm not giving her a 2-week notice, I'll never be able to work at one of those sandwich shops again. At that point, I didn't really even care. I had already give up my brand new car of only 4 months because I couldn't pay my loan and insurance. It was a nice car too, a white shimmery 2016 Hyundai Sonata. I love that thing. I told her at some point that week I tried to get the brand new uniform that, funny enough, they had just given to me the week prior, a whole 3.5 months after I started working there. But I warned her my classes run till right before closing. I didn't know when I'd be able to do so. She texts back in what I can only imagine the snarkiest tone possible. "No, I really need that uniform back tomorrow." I told her, well, I'm sorry, but that may not be possible due to my school schedule. I'm not willing to ditch a class to drop off a few pieces of clothing. She said, "No, you will bring it back tomorrow. Don't even try to lie to me. You were seen in store the day you quit. No excuses." Okay then, she said, no excuses. I didn't want to go into an argument with her over it. Well, and knowing that she herself would be closing that day and my classes ended at 8 exactly, well, I happily complied. I made sure that I'd arrive right as she was closing the lock on the gate. I was bringing the clothes in my reusable shopping bag. I had no throwaway bags, and since she can't take and claim my bag as her own, I was just going to give her the clothes one piece at a time. Knowing she would have to carry them out of the store, juggling them back home made me happy. When it came time to deliver my uniform to her, all the stars seemed to align perfectly. I arrived at 8:30, caught her on the way out with the outfit, not even in a reusable bag to begin with. As an extra touch of sweet unplanned irony, it was raining outside. Hard rain. The sidewalks, I guess, were just extra slippery and muddy, because on my way in, I slipped and landed chest first into the mud. I was mostly spared, though, because the clothes were there to break my fall and absorb most of the filth. Dropping off the muddy, loose clothes, seeing her reaction, watching her stomp her feet, wrench in disgust, holding the clothes 10 feet away from her body, huff and puff and march out the store in pure shock and disbelief. She didn't even have words for me. It was the sweetest revenge that I had ever seen. This did mean, though, that I had to buy a whole new set of clothes and change in the Walmart bathroom, but it was all worth it to see her reaction in the end. After I had returned to my dorm that evening, I sent her a text saying simply, "Enjoy," and I blocked her number. Safe to say, karma really did pay out on my end. Oh, nice, OP. See, the cool thing about this one, it's layer on layer, and all those layers, separate clothes, rainy day at the end, all added up and culminated into an epic malicious Karen compliance. Way to go, dude. Security tells me no. Okay, it's no. Posted by Available Election 86. I work for a subsidiary of a Fortune 500 as a manager of a dev team. I have 7 people under me, think L3 people, very knowledgeable and driven to solve issues. We're all remote. I'm lucky my team is mostly great and we achieve the objectives we are given. One day, the new security manager decides that devs are not allowed to be administrators of their laptops. He writes a new company policy for it. It's a crap show for us. It means my team can't work on some applications that require administrative rights. Also, as devs know, some bugs need my guys to install and deinstall and reinstall the applications many times to make it work, changing only a few parameters each time. So I try to push back, saying that it might impact our service level agreements, but the security manager doesn't want to understand, and he just sends me emails with "No" in bold and caps. His boss is AFK, away from keyboard, for health reasons, so I can't escalate as I would have. The only way to make my guys work is that we need someone with the admin rights to unlock them when they need it. That admin is part of the support center. So, cue malicious compliance. I ask for my team to create a ticket each time. They're not happy about it, of course. The support center manager isn't happy either, because we create a lot of tickets, and his team has been understaffed for a while. I also tell all the other managers in my department to do the same, and even though they create a lot less tickets than my team, it helps. Of course, this is my plan. If my team is unhappy, other people in the company are going to be too. So, pressure piles up. The support center manager is unhappy. His boss saw the numbers increase too, so he's unhappy too. He talks to my boss, but hey, I have emails from the security manager. The support center manager asked me to be reasonable and asked for a number of hours per week. I'm a team player, of course, so yes, I want to help him. I ask for 20 hours per week for a guy from his team to sit around waiting for my team to need him, unlock their install, and then wait some more. I'm guessing the admin is pretty happy about it because it's way less pressure than his normal job and there's not much to do but type in an admin password once in a while. It helps reduce, or not increase, the number of tickets, but the support center has less people so they resolve less tickets than before. Then comes the climax. One application has a critical bug outside of the hours of the support center guy, so I tell them, as per my agreement with the support center manager and obeying the security manager, my team can't work on it yet. We'll have to wait until the next day. It's a healthcare product, so it means a lot of our customers are going to be upset about it. I can't say too much, I don't want to be found. Of course, since I'm a reasonable guy, the support center manager is too, so we find someone with admin rights and put my guys to work. The resolution of the ticket takes much longer than usual to solve because of all the back and forth between the admin and my team. During the post-mortem, it's found that the new security policy was the main delaying cause. Every member of my team told the post-mortem woman that, as I did. I have all the emails I sent to the security manager highlighting the risk of this new policy and him saying that he didn't care for it. I sent that to the postmortem woman and let her find the way in the politics. 3 months later, the security manager doesn't work for us anymore, and most of my members of my team, but not all, have admin rights on their machine. I learned that the support center manager has made his mission in life to complain about the security manager to everyone who would listen and have him fired. And the support center manager knows a lot of people in the company. His director agreed with him, and with the postmortem woman, or her boss, I'm not sure at this point, they convinced the VP to fire the security manager even before the security director came back from his health issue. If there is one way to get malicious compliance, it is spamming a bunch of tickets to do an unnecessary thing when there's so much of an easier way. It's like climbing up a snow-filled hill to get to your top of the mountain when there's an elevator that's working right beside of it. Way to go, OP. You want the exact amount? You get the exact amount. Posted by CrackSnap7. When I was 13 or 14, I decided that I wanted a PS3. My dad refused to buy me one, but my uncle made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. He said that if I worked at his sweet shop for the 2 months of summer break, he would buy me a PS3 and some games in lieu of payment. For teenage me with no commitments, this seemed fantastic. My uncle sold a kind of specialty snack known as a mini samosa in his shop. They're like samosas, but smaller, about 3.5 to 4 centimeters in size, which is about 1 in 2,286 of a football field for my American friends. They were sold by weight in sealed packs of 250 grams and 500 grams, as these were the most common amounts that people bought. Making those packages turned out to be my job. You see, sometime between now and when my uncle first started his business, he realized that 250 grams was roughly the weight of 28 mini samosas, and thus 56 were 500 grams. So, instead of weighing each packet, I was just told to pack by counting individual items, which was easier and saved time. We also sold them individually for people who wanted larger, smaller, or unusual amounts. This was also around the time when our government started airing customer awareness PSAs. Basically, just telling customers to beware fraudulent business people. This is relevant. So, one particularly hot afternoon, it was just me and my uncle at the shop. In India, frequent power cuts were very common during summers, and thus there were no fans or AC running. Both tempers and temperatures were running high at the shop that day. It was then that the villain of our story, Mr. Karen, made his entry. He was a local resident and a regular. He seemed angry from the onset when he barged into the shop. He took a look at the fans and saw that they weren't running, and then angrily picked up a 500-gram pack of samosas and said, "How many samosas are in this thing?" "That's 500 grams, I said. I said how many, not how much. Mr. Karen literally screamed, "Again, how many in this?" 56, I replied immediately since, I packed them. "How can you be so sure? You didn't even count. You're trying to cheat me." Mr. Karen was now in full-scale Karen mode. "I demand that you pack me 500 grams of those individual ones, and don't you dare cheat me again." I looked over at my uncle, wet with sweat, fanning himself with yesterday's newspaper. He slowly nodded. I beamed with a huge smile. "Sure, sir, whatever you want." So I took a bag, picked up some samosas, and started putting them on the balance. I kept counting samosas as I put them in until they were a little over 500 grams. Then I removed the last samosa and the weight fell below 500. Now, keeping eye contact with Mr. Karen, I crushed the samosa and started putting its powdery remains in the bag until it was exactly 500 grams. But wait, there's more. Mr. Karen apparently didn't seem to mind powdered samosa, but instead asked smugly, "So, how many samosas now?" 48, I claimed triumphantly. You see, sometime in the past, my uncle's old chef retired and the new chef made samosas with a little bit more filling in them. They looked the same size on the outside and only weighed a couple grams more each, and since he made them in bulk and also sold to other shops in the area, the price wasn't too much of an issue. So my uncle let it slide. But those couple grams added up on mass orders, and that is what Mr. Karen found out the hard way. He looked sheepishly at the pre-packed samosas and then at his own package and asked if he could buy the former instead. "No, my nephew made a package specially for you at your own request, so that is what you have to buy," my uncle finally spoke. Mr. Karen silently took his pack, paid, and left. He was a lot more respectful during his subsequent visits. I was reminded of this story yesterday when my PS3 finally died. As evident, English is not my first language. In fact, it's not even my third, so please excuse any mistakes. OP is over here, knows more than 3 languages, measures out and maliciously complies with his uncle to make a lot more money from the shop and get a Karen out and busted? Way to go, OP. Don't want my help? Sure, go ahead and get yourself fired. Posted by Remote Syllabub 7412. A bit of background. A while back, when I was still in high school, I worked at the local cinema to earn a bit of pocket money and experience. I stayed for a couple years, working weekends when school was in session. I think it was halfway into my second year when the target of this revenge came into the picture. We'll call him Luke. Luke was a new hire and was just learning the ropes. Now, this was common as turnover was high since we were all students. He seemed alright at first, and everyone was nice to him since we were all pretty close and knew one another from school, and well, we welcomed him in. I don't think even a week passed before the problems started. The first issue I heard of was that Luke was trying to flirt with one of the girls. Thing was, this girl was already in a relationship with one of the other employees, and everyone knew this, including Luke. That didn't stop him though, and eventually the girl told him to his face to cut it out. It only got worse from there. Now, I do my best to see the good in people and to give them the benefit of the doubt. Despite what others were saying, I still tried to get along with him. This unfortunately changed during the first real conversation I had with him. We were on break at the same time, and about 5 of us crowded into the little break room for lunch. I forget what exactly we were talking about, but I remember that it was a pretty uncomfortable topic, and Luke was using a lot of explicatives. The break room was not soundproof, and there were patrons outside, especially children. I tried to warn him about using that language so loudly, and that he might get in trouble if a customer heard him. Immediately, his attitude toward me changed, and he responded with something along the lines of, "I can say what I want. I have the right to free speech. Don't tell me what to do." What? Sheesh, okay, chill. I was just concerned, but you do you. A few minutes later, the convo had switched to high school, and Luke was raving about how Caucasians were the majority in all the high schools in our district. Now, for my high school, this isn't true, as most of the community and students attending were Latino and made up about 70% of our student body. I told him as much. I said, "Well, that's not the case for our high school." Luke says, yeah, it is. White's the majority everywhere. I have a friend that goes there. Hey, Luke, I actually go there. It's mostly, "Why are you talking?" he replied. I said, "Excuse me?" Luke said, "Who invited you to this conversation? I wasn't talking to you. Who asked?" Now, this irritated me. Now, I know it's a joke about looking for who asked, but this was before that became a thing, and I found it extremely rude. But in a moment of clarity, the best comeback came to mind. Like arguing in the shower by yourself, and to this day, I could only wish to be able to recreate the moment. Smiling, I threw his words right back into his face. Free speech. The others at the table were laughing as I threw away the rest of my lunch and left the break room. My heart was beating so fast from the weird adrenaline rush that I got, and I spent the rest of my break in the back of the concessions until it was time to clock back in. I think that convo was what sparked Luke's hatred of me. Ever since then, he would glare at me whenever I walked by, would dump the trash from his bin when we were sweeping the floors for me to pick up, and generally was a jerk. His behavior kept getting worse. He would threaten to fight people, and he was a short potato of a boy, really, so no one was really actually scared. He would argue, say rude, passive-aggressive, or downright racial things, and was generally just a jerk. At some point during a shift that I wasn't there, he cornered the girl that he'd been eyeing and kept verbally harassing her to the point that she hid in the manager's office where he couldn't get to her. She was a sweet and loyal girl and a friend, and she and her boyfriend could be described with the phrase puppy love and had been together for a long time. The boyfriend was angry when she texted the group chat about what had happened and wanted to get Luke fired. However, people were hesitant about this, saying that the managers wouldn't want to because he claimed discrimination, he was trans, and that he hadn't done anything blatantly wrong. Then another one of the employees made a suggestion. Luke was incompetent. We all knew this, so why not make the manager see it too? Revenge time. It wasn't hard to do, since Luke would tend to shoot himself in the foot. When possible, we'd point him out to the managers when reviewing the cameras in the halls about him dumping his trash can when sweeping onto the ground in front of patrons. When he was cursing up a storm during break, a text would be sent and someone would lead a manager to him to be caught. He rarely cleaned up. He was rude and loud, and the incident with the girl didn't help his case. It still wasn't enough, and week after week, his name was on the schedule. Then, my opportunity came. See, at the cinema, there's a position called Point, aka the ticket taker, that lets you into the theater area. It's the second most dreaded position, and the first being self-serve cleanup, as you have to stand in place and interact with customers at a rapid-fire pace, smiling and listening for theaters to be called at the same time. When the night ends, the last person on point has to close and clean the self-serve stations. Today, to my initial dread, Luke and I were both on point. The entire time, Luke would leave his station and pace the lobby, toward me and then back, not even sweeping the ground as he went. He wasn't supposed to leave point, and he had to walk around customers to get back to his podium to help them. He was told off by a manager once or twice for this, but continued his antics anyway. Then, as things slowed down, one of the managers approached me and told me that we were going down to one point, which is one person at the center, rather than at both entrances, and that I'd have to explain to Luke how to close point before I went back to help clean concessions. It had to be this way, since I had already taken the sanitation test and Luke had yet to do so, and therefore wasn't allowed behind concessions. When I finished closing my point, I walked over to Luke and told him to move his podium to the center so he could take closing point. He did, though scowling at me. When he was set, I began to explain. I said, "So you'll be closing point tonight after the last movie starts, and you'll need to go to the—" "Go away." What? "I don't need your help, so don't talk to me." "But I need to teach you how to close point." I don't care, shut up." I know you don't like me, but this is work, so you need to—" "No, I don't want your help. Shut the heck up." "But frick off and don't talk to me." At this point, I was beyond upset. I was furious. I was trying to help even after he had acted how he had treated everyone here. I didn't care what he said in the break room, but it shouldn't affect work. This was ridiculous. I must have snapped or something, because I complied, walking away saying, "Fine, I don't care, don't ever talk to me again." "Hey," I said. I waved my hand over my shoulder. "Don't talk to me ever again." I went behind concessions to help, where he couldn't reach me. I don't know when, but I started crying out of frustration, and one of my friends came and hugged me, bringing me to a corner to cool down. I don't get angry often, and when I do, it makes me scared. I was just sick of his antics, sick of the way he spoke to me, just sick of his attitude. I'm not sure how long that I sat back there, but soon enough that same friend came and waved me to the front of concessions. I wiped my face and walked out, and he pointed to point. There was Luke, being instructed by the manager on how to close point, and the manager did not look happy with him. Arms folded, frowning, flat tone, everything spoke of irritation. My friend said that they'd already explained that Luke refused my help when the manager asked him what was going on, as point can be seen and heard from almost the entire lobby. Seeing that scene lifted my spirits a bit, and I was able to end the night relatively easily. The next weekend, when the schedule came out, I didn't even have to check my email. It was posted in the group text, specifically the section with Luke's name. It was blacked out. If he had quit, his name would have been removed. But the fact that it was blacked out meant it was a sudden event. Luke had been fired. I'm not sure what it was that they fired him for anymore, but considering that we were always low on staff and they had to worry about discrimination, I'm guessing there were enough complaints that they had to fire him. I'd like to think that the last interaction that I had with him was the final nail in the coffin, but I was just glad to see him go more than anything. I heard he worked at a common fast food place for a while, but ended up getting McFired from there too. Good luck in life, Luke. You weren't missed. The beautiful thing about malicious compliance stories, such as this one, is that the work and value stands true. This person was being a horrible coworker, if you've ever had one before, and their removal was based off of their work and actions. Not a great person to hang around with, not a good worker, and that was the catalyst for them being fired and gone. Not favoritism or anything like that, which is really cool. You get angry and belittle me when I want to follow the instruction manual on your brand new piece of kit? Enjoy your brand new rusty wheel slicer, posted by Petty Rusty. It's been years, but I'm still worried that this person is going to hunt me down in my sleep, hence the throwaway. I used to work at a deli shop / cafe place just to make ends meet while I went to university, and the owner of that place was a real piece of work. If you got on her bad side, you were on the crap list, and she would be both openly and passively aggressive with the general vibe that you were an incompetent idiot no matter what you did. I heard that woman scream at a 15-year-old on her second day because she had mixed up coffee and teacups, which differed in size by about an ounce, just to give you an idea of her personality. After this whole experience, my dad told me that, as a general hint, it may be good to be suspicious if a workplace hires exclusively teen girls with no experience because they're very unlikely to recognize crappy workplace treatment. There were 2 people in this place who didn't take her crap. Me, a mid-20s recovering addict who's seen way worse, and a 45-year-old Iranian man who told her that she could go freak herself when she berated him for not being willing to come in early to his 11-hour shift to prep ingredients. Off the clock, of course. I like that dude. With the stage set, onto the malicious compliance. When I started, this place desperately needed a new wheel meat slicer. The one they made had a constant screeching noise and drove everyone crazy. About a month and a half into my employment, they got one. Industrial grade, cost $5,000, both looked and worked accordingly. Amazing piece of kit. As we were all celebrating and unpacking it, I flipped through the instruction booklet to look up how it works and specifically how to clean it, as there were quite a few parts. Manual says to clean everything detachable thoroughly, but that the wheel itself should be cleaned by letting it run on very low speed with safety precautions and using a cloth and alcohol-based cleaning agent on the exposed part. There were some pictures and detailed instructions on how to do this, and it explicitly stated not to take the whole wheel off and deep clean it, as this would remove the wheel lubricant and anti-corrosive agent, and it would risk damage to the machine, and to especially not let water or any cleaning agents get into the machine without making sure to thoroughly replace any lubricant. I was working the evening shift, so 99% of the time it was up to me to clean it. The instructions is how I clean the machine because I trust the designer to know how to clean it. Or I do for about 2 days until my boss sees me, ask what the heck I'm doing and why I'm not taking the wheel off to clean it. She berates me about food safety and hygiene standards, telling me how disgusting I am for doing it this way. I stand my ground and inform her that I do it this way because of the instructions, that I'm following the manual, and explain the reason behind it. If we scrub it down, especially the inner part, the grease will go away a lot faster and will risk damage to the machine. She basically tells me to shove it and do it her way. Now, I'm not going to ruin a $5,000 thing because one woman doesn't understand how lubrication works, but the very next day, my manager sees me clean the machine and gives me an extremely condescending talk down on how, quote, "This isn't how we approach hygiene," and how, "Boss told me you don't seem to understand food safety." My explanation falls on deaf ears again, and I'm also informed not only am I expected to take the wheel off and scrub it at the end of the day, but after every use. Boss also wants me to make sure that I spray off the inside section to ensure there's no bacteria in there, with some hints that there'd apparently been a whole colony of life growing in there due to my 2-day negligence. She wants me to spray soap and water mixture into the cogs of a machine that they just bought. The blade is stainless steel, but the frickin' cogs aren't. Freaking fine. If that's what you want me to do, that's what I'll do. Every day, 5 times a day, I take the freaking machine apart and I scrub it down. Every day I see that lubrication disappear more and more, and after a week it's all gone, eventually becoming replaced by growing patches of rust. I feel bad for the machine, but I do as I've been told. I only work 6 days a week, so every day I come in after my break thinking that surely yesterday my manager would have reacted. Nope. She takes it apart just like I do, clean it like I do, and doesn't seem to think twice about the fact that this brand new machine is rusting apart in front of our eyes. In fact, she goes the extra mile and also scrubs the cog itself, which is probably why a year or so worth of lubricant disappeared in 1 week. The thing about rusty machinery is that it usually works up until a certain point, but once it reaches that point, there's no going back. One day, I turn it on, and it makes a screeching noise that I can only imagine came from the soul of this bit of kit, wondering why God has forsaken it, and it's like all the clocks stop. My coworker in the pastry section comes over to ask me what the heck that noise is. My boss and manager come into the room with the same question, and I just shrug and slice my salami. Boss tells her co-owner to go get some lubrication for the gears. And after a minute, he puts some freaking spray on oil lube in front of me and tells me to lube the gears up. I ask him where the lithium lubricant paste is, since according to the instructions, that's what you need, and he seems flabbergasted that putting something made for hinges and ball bearings isn't appropriate for a meat slicer. 2 days and some tinnitus later, he's acquired some grease and then proceeds to be stumped when I let him know that I'm not going to stop doing my regular job to spend 30 minutes greasing up this machine unless someone else takes over my station or they pay me overtime. My boss is, meanwhile, demanding to know why I haven't told them we needed to stock up on lithium grease, which I don't even bother to respond to. I make sandwiches, I'm not your mechanic. I left that job a few weeks later, and when I did, the machine was still crying the song of its ancestors every time we turned it on. And we were still scrubbing it down from the inside out daily, of course. I have since then gotten a sneaking suspicion that I know what happened to its predecessor, and me and my dad, who is actually a mechanic, still laugh about it sometimes. My boss did ask, rhetorically, at one point, how the heck the machine got to that stage so fast. I answered that it's probably because we've been scrubbing the lubrication and corrosion protection off several times a day, and I take great pleasure in the memory that she completely ignored me. It's the only time while I was there that she didn't snap back at me. And I like to think that she remembered back to when I explicitly told her that if we clean this thing in that way, this is exactly what would happen. Overall, I don't think a $5,000 machine would make or break anything, but holy crap did that make me feel good. This here is a great example of something called manglement, where management just completely mangles things to pieces. That's a common word used in the comment section of my videos. And a $5,000 machine rendered next to useless nothing almost. Oh, not quite. Just because someone didn't want to go with what the employees said with the instructions in the manual. That's MC right there. Malicious Compliance cost company hundreds of millions and their most profitable product. Posted by Catfish21SM. So this is a story from someone I know. I've known this person for years, and while I don't work with them, I've seen this story play out more or less step by step. I know several people involved, but I'm going to tell it from the point of view of the person that I know best. So, many years ago, this person, let's just refer to them as person got a really great job working for a Fortune 500 company. Not going to give any more specifics, but the company offered many benefits for their employees. They treated their employees like people and not like numbers. They offered a yearly raise to anyone who worked there. This was meant to do several things. First of all, it was meant to keep up with inflation so that employees wouldn't have to stress about money. I'm sure a lot of you know the struggle, waiting for minimum wage to be updated so you can start saving money to hold over till the next wage increase. No, the company was ahead of the curve. On top of that, when they did start hiring new employees for more, they increased the wage of anyone with that specific position by the same amount to keep the older employees from earning less than newer employees. They offered many other benefits as well. Basically, an awesome place to work for. Unfortunately, It's a small town, and the company wanted to expand that specific branch of operations. They couldn't do it here, so they chose to move out. They sold the branch office building along with the product that person worked to another smaller company. When it was sold, then person went with it. The old company made the new company sign a contract which guaranteed that the yearly bonus would stay around along with several other similar benefits. New company wasn't around very long, and they ended up expanding as well. They did the same thing, sold the location and the product to another company. Unfortunately, they didn't care as much about their employees and only treated them well because of contractual obligations. So, when they sold the location and product, it didn't come with a contract. New company did care a little bit about the employees, but ended raises and all of that. They would listen to employee complaints. That was about it. They weren't around long either before the scummiest company came in and bought them out. So, new company comes in and buys them out and immediately starts changing policies and shifting everything up to make everyone's jobs harder. Person and their team members got used to it and kept going. Now, here's the thing about Person. Person works on a team of specialists. There are only about 12 people on the team and a manager that's over them. Well, there was. I'll get to that. This team doesn't require any special education or anything, but it does require a several-week training course and several months of acclimation. The product is extremely delicate, and the customers for this product are extremely demanding. They, more or less, require perfection, anything short and no money. You must watch every single word that you say to these customers, or they might write you off permanently. However, this is an extremely valuable product, and the company makes a lot of money from it. Or they did, at least. Let's speed forward about 10 or 15 years. The company has only found new ways to treat their employees less like humans since they took it over and are somehow getting away with it. Turnover is high, but as long as they have high school grads looking for a job, then they can keep their building full. Unfortunately, Person and their team have asked for a raise several times at this point, and they were always being turned down because they are earning at market value for their position. I looked it up, and market value is determined by a simple equation that takes into account other people in your profession at your experience level and with your job title within about 100 miles, and then it calculates an average wage for them. Considering the extreme specialty of this position and being located in a remote region, market value is determined by calculating the average wage of everyone on Person's team. Basically, the company was saying, "Shut up, we aren't giving you a raise." Now, something to understand, Person and their team members weren't that disappointed not to get a raise every year. However, they were now making only a little more than a new hire with the company. And there are other companies that do similar but less specialized work in the area, but start people out with a higher wage than Person is making at this point. I literally knew high school grads with zero work experience that made more than Person did. Now, at this point, Person has about 20 plus years of experience working this specific product, and the least experienced person on the team had been working it for 12 plus years. The straw that broke the camel's back was an annual investors meeting that was streamed live to the entire company. Person working on a small team was invited to take a few hours off to watch the meeting. It was kind of a reward for them for performing so well. The company shot themselves in the foot with this one though, and it was already starting to go south anyways. They just sped it up a little. So to put this into perspective for you guys, the company's total profit for that year, that's profit not earnings, was a little over $1.2 billion. Out of that $1.2 billion, Person's team of 12 people, in a company hiring tens of thousands mind you, these 12 people and their manager brought in about $480 million. That's a little over a third of the company's total profits for the entire year. For those that don't like math, that's about $40 million per person of pure profit. Person specifically earned a little over $60 million alone. The lowest earner on the team was over $20 million. Seeing that they were single-handedly responsible for over a third of the company's total profit for the year, the entire team got together and demanded a raise. The manager actually put that in before they even said anything. Even their manager thought it was wrong. They demanded $20 an hour. They actually only wanted half of that, but since they were being lowballed and completely underappreciated by the company for the work that they did, they put in a higher number. By the way, $10 is about the amount that they would have been making with their yearly bonus had it never been discontinued. As you might expect, the company, being money hungry, came back with the same response as usual. They didn't even try to negotiate. They asked several more times over the course of a few weeks, threatening to quit if they didn't get a raise, and the company basically just said, go on, anyone can do your job. Cue malicious compliance. They didn't all quit. Only 3 of the 12, which, if you've been keeping up, would add up to, on average, $120 million over 1 year. But that's not all. Actually, what they did ended up turning out even worse for the company. The rest of the team all agreed to only work their minimum requirements. The company had minimum requirements that everyone had to meet. This team, up to this point, being proud of the work they put in consistently, exceeded the requirements many times over. They would compete to see who could perform the best. The lowest earner on this team often exceeded minimum requirements by 3 times over. At the end of the year, the company had to painfully explain to investors why their highest earning department was now performing at less than half what it did the previous year. They came up with some stupid explanations. They still refused to give a raise though. Instead, what they decided to do was raise their minimum requirements. At first, the team kept up, but eventually, out of aggravation, when their constant requests for a raise were denied, about half the team requested transfer off. They were transferred to other departments and replaced with brand new employees, and the most experienced of which had been with this company for about a year. These new employees struggled to keep up with the minimum requirements, which kept getting raised to meet stockholder expectations. Eventually, original members on the team had either quit or transferred to another department, even the manager. This left the team with only new employees who had absolutely no idea what they were doing, and they completely alienated the vast majority of their former customers almost overnight. And if that wasn't enough, because they could not meet the extremely high demands of the company, which were still only a fraction of what the original team were performing, they were either let go or transferred to another department and replaced after only a few months on the team. Even hiring several times the number of employees on that team did nothing. When they reported an earnings of $80 million from that team, the company got so fed up with it that they just sold the product to another company for an enormous loss. Unfortunately, this isn't one of those the company drove themselves out of business stories, but I still think it's pretty funny and I like to tell it to all my new friends. I also use it to warn anyone who might be considering going to this company to work. Honestly, you'd think that if someone earns that much profit for your company, you'd at least try to keep them around. The thing that I love about this is that these people went above and beyond, and still they showed how much value they had. In their workplace, they showed how important they were, what they could bring to the table, and that was just neglected. And when it is neglected, this happens. The common phrase people say is that you don't quit a bad job, you quit a bad boss, and these guys here were doing the work, putting it in, showing the value, and were not appreciated. And this is what happens with malicious compliance. Want me to punch in on the work clock? Fine, now deal with overtime pay. Posted by Disastrous Narwhal 926. I, a 31-year-old male, started working for my uncle 2 years ago. He has a company with some business partners of his, and my work is now being directly under him, learning every perk of running the business and also being a personal assistant to him. We settled on a contract in which I'd receive a fixed monthly amount with a bonus of additional salary by the end of every year, and while I had no overtime pay, I had total control of my work schedule. And by total, I meant total, where I could come to the job just 3 days a week as long as I delivered results. My uncle knew my work ethic, so it's kind of a win for him since when needed, I'd work 60 and 65 hours a week. If needed to, I could also work during a holiday. We have around 10 or 12 festivity days that are non-working days. If I were to put it into an American perspective, it's just as if we had over 10 4th of July holidays during the year. Also, I was available on call nearly 24/7 if anyone needed anything from me related to work. Work was running great until September last year, when my uncle took a couple days to travel to another state to meet new clients, and one of his associates, let's call him Gordon, took his role in the company for those days to support some of the roles. Due to having worked a 14-hour shift the day before the travel, and also having two 12-hour shifts the week before, I was dead tired. And well, since we had little to no work piled up, I took early leave the first day he was there and arrived way after lunch the day after, then started working normally from the third day until he came back a week later. He was furious at my attitude, berating my uncle for even contracting me in the first place, since I don't even work full regular hours, and demand among the other business partners, the company has in total 6 owners, including my uncle, that I at least punch in my working hours, and if I don't meet the quota, those would be deducted from my monthly payment. There's a ton of labor laws where I live. Employees have a certain amount of hours required to work each month, every hour short of that is deducted from the monthly payment, and every hour beyond is paid as overtime. Other partners backed up Gordon's claim, stating that I needed more supervision on what I was doing, which my uncle was forced to comply, and his only remark was, since we're doing it by law, it means we'll also have to pay him overtime according to the law, right? They all agreed. And from October forward, I would start punching my hours on the job every day. Cue malicious compliance. That was exactly what I did. Gordon was expecting a decrease on my pay due to being in the company at least my busy week since I arrived, when in fact I usually pull a crapload of overtime. Also, if they need to call me after I left, they have to punch in the hours from the moment I left until I finish the call, resulting in free overtime pay. One more thing. By the law, the rate of overtime pay increases the more overtime is done in a month. It's a really weird formula, but to simplify it, my average overtime hours pays 1/3 higher than the average overtime hours of other employees that have the same monthly salary as me. My monthly income is now 30% higher due to the overtime I started receiving, and in a busy month, that could get even close to 50% higher, even though I'm actually working a little less than before. And Gordon can't go back in the same situation as before, since my uncle made sure that once I started punching my hours, there was no going back, and all the partners approved it. Not only did OP do malicious compliance to get better pay, better hours, and treatment, they can't go back. He knew the book. He knew how to seal that deal that where it could not be unsealed from Gordon. Way to go, OP. Just ship the equipment to me. Posted by BMacPL4442. A couple of years ago, I took a fantastic job as an IT manager in a remote role for a healthcare company. It was the best job I'd ever had. Best salary, total freedom, and a wonderful boss who trusted me to do my job. I was brought on to create an internal IT team, and we'd all been outsourced IT, for a company that had 19 offices in 3 US states, and I was given free rein to create the team as I saw fit. I hired a great sysadmin for both our California and Missouri markets, and I served that role for Alabama. The employees loved us. Most tickets were resolved in an hour or two instead of the outsourced company taking a day or two, and maybe not fixing the issue still. We were saving the company close to $500,000 per year in outsourced cost versus our salaries. Now, the figure does include savings on licensing that the outsourced company never cared to audit. It was glorious. But my boss decided to become a stay-at-home dad. I was looking to advance to his position, but our new CEO instead created a new VP of IT position for a guy that she had worked with for 7 previous years. Sadly, the new guy was the micromanager of micromanagers. He had my company credit card closed. I went from a discretionary limit of $10,000 to having to ask his approval on $10 network cables. He put himself on every account, removed most of my authority, and in effect, I was demoted to senior sysadmin. One day, I visited one of our sites and picked up a bunch of stuff. 5 desktop PCs, we had moved to laptops only, a carton full of keyboards, mice, and cables, weird odds and ends. The idea was that I would take it to one of our other facilities and store it there, save the desktop PCs that I would ship to our outsource partner. Well, I went on vacation, only to come home to discover that the previous Friday had been my last day. I was getting 2 weeks severance and they were eliminating the department entirely. I asked the VP about the equipment and he told me to ship it all to him and he'd dispense of it. Now, I assumed that he'd want me to ship it to the outsource company, or at least to do so with the PCs. But no. The thing is, the VP lives in Colorado. We have no branches there. The outsource partner is in Missouri, meaning that no matter what, he'd at least be reshipping those PCs to Missouri. Oh well. Well, I went to FedEx and I carted all the crap in. They offered me various methods, but I told them that it was all going on the company's account to ship it ground per VP, but to do so in whatever method made them the most money. Friends, they spent well over 3 hours carefully wrapping and padding all of that crap. They charged the company several $100s. By my best estimate from previous shipping I'd done with them, it was about triple what it should have been. And of course, VP also had to pay to ship those desktops again. But hey, he told me to do it. Company held my severance until they got the equipment, so I guess that satisfied their requirements. Also, screw that guy. He's a thief and I know it, and I even turned him in, but the company did nothing. Hey, he told you what to do and you did it. He told you how to ship and you shipped it and you just kind of tweaked it a little bit to make it triple damage. That's some malicious compliance right there. Follow the rules and just turn it up a little notch, right? Too bad the company didn't turn him in. That's a bummer, but you knew, and it's unfortunate ending, but some MC went down here for sure. Check out my next malicious compliance compilation to continue your listening session by clicking here on your screen. Thank you so much for checking this one out and see you in the next one.